My name is Madison Carter, and I just turned 25 last month. I always thought family meant unconditional love and support, especially when tragedy strikes. That belief shattered the moment my father texted, "Can't this wait? We're busy," as I lay in a hospital bed needing emergency surgery. The doctors needed parental consent due to medication complications, and my own father couldn't be bothered to come. So, I called Grandpa Henry instead. 3 weeks later, I walked into my parents' house with some papers that would change our family forever. I grew up in what looked like a picture-perfect middle-class family in suburban Chicago. From the outside, we had it all: a 2-story house with a manicured lawn, family vacations to Florida every winter, and parents who attended all the right school functions when other parents were watching. Richard and Susan Carter, the power couple of Lincoln Heights, were respected real estate agents who built their business from scratch. That was the image they carefully cultivated. But what neighbors and acquaintances didn't see were the countless piano recitals where I scanned the audience for familiar faces that never appeared. The birthday parties where my parents arrived 2 hours late with expensive gifts but no apologies. The nights I ate microwave dinners alone because they were showing houses or networking at industry events. Business first, Maddie, my father would remind me whenever I expressed disappointment. This business puts food on the table and that roof over your head. Never forget that. My mother was slightly more nurturing but ultimately deferred to my father in all matters. "Your father knows best," became her mantra whenever I questioned their absence. "We're building this business for your future." As a child, I believed them. What else could I do? The one constant source of love and support in my life was my grandfather. Henry Carter, Dad's father. Ironically enough, Grandpa Henry was everything my father wasn't: patient, present, and genuinely interested in my life. After Grandma passed when I was 7, he channeled all his love into being the best grandfather possible. When my parents missed my 8th grade graduation because of a can't-miss property listing, Grandpa Henry was there with flowers and took me for ice cream after. When I made honor roll in high school and my parents responded with a distracted, "That's nice, honey," Grandpa showed up the next day with a special journal he'd picked out that matched my favorite color. "For a scholar," he'd said, with genuine pride. Despite my parents' emotional neglect, I managed to forge my own path. I earned a partial scholarship to Illinois State University and worked part-time throughout college to cover the rest of my expenses. My parents could have helped more financially, but they insisted I needed to learn the value of hard work, despite their comfortable income. Meanwhile, they bought a vacation condo they rarely used. After graduating with a degree in legal studies, I landed an entry-level position as a paralegal at Adler & Associates, a small but respected law firm in Chicago. My starting salary wasn't impressive, but I was proud of securing the position without any family connections. Predictably, my parents were underwhelmed. "Law firms are fine for experience," my father commented dismissively when I shared my news. "But real estate is where the real money is. When you're ready to join a successful family business, just say the word." I never said the word. Instead, I worked harder, stayed late, and impressed my bosses enough to earn a small raise after my first year. I saved carefully and finally purchased my first car 3 months before the accident, a used Honda Civic with 70,000 miles on it. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, bought with my own money. When I drove it to my parents' house for dinner, my father walked around it once and said, "This is why you should consider real estate. You could be driving a BMW by now." My small 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of an older building was another point of pride for me, though my parents saw it as further evidence of my stubborn refusal to accept their help. The rent was reasonable, the location convenient for my commute, and I decorated it with second-hand furniture I'd refinished myself under Grandpa Henry's patient guidance. He taught me about sanding, staining, and the satisfaction of creating something beautiful with your own hands. "Your grandmother and I started with less," he told me as we transformed an old coffee table I'd found at a thrift store. "But we built a life filled with love. That's what matters, Maddie, not the size of your house or the car you drive." My neighbor Chloe Nguyen quickly became a friend after I moved in. A nurse at Chicago Memorial Hospital. She kept unusual hours like I did and appreciated quiet companionship when our schedules aligned. We shared coffee on Sunday mornings or the occasional weeknight glass of wine, swapping stories about difficult attorneys and demanding patients. 2 weeks before the accident, I received news of a promotion at work. Junior paralegal to paralegal wasn't a massive leap, but it came with a 15% raise and more direct client contact. I was ecstatic and called my parents immediately, hoping finally to hear some validation. "That's nice, honey," my mother said distractedly. "Listen, we're just heading into a meeting with potential investors for our new office location. Can we call you back?" They never did. When I mentioned the promotion to Grandpa Henry, however, he insisted on taking me out to dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant to celebrate. "I'm so proud of you, Maddie," he said, raising his glass of wine in a toast. "You've built this life on your own terms. That takes courage." I didn't know then how much more courage I would need in the weeks to come. The day everything changed started normally enough. Wednesday, April 15th, tax day. Ironically, I'd stayed late at the office helping one of the partners, Thomas Adler, organize last-minute filings for clients. By the time I left, it was after 9, and a storm had moved in, sending sheets of rain across the parking lot. "Drive safe, Maddie," Thomas called as I headed out. "Thanks for your help today. We're lucky to have you." Those words warmed me as I dashed to my car, holding my blazer over my head in a futile attempt to stay dry. The storm had intensified by the time I merged onto the highway. Windshield wipers struggling to keep up with the downpour. I reduced my speed, keeping a careful distance from the cars ahead. "Safety first," Grandpa Henry's voice echoed in my head. I never saw the pickup truck until it was too late. Later, police reports would show the driver's blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit. All I remember is a sudden swerve of headlights crossing the median, the horrifying realization that the truck was in my lane, heading straight toward me, and the split-second decision to wrench my steering wheel right. The impact came anyway. Metal tearing, glass shattering, airbags deploying in an explosion of white. My car spun once, twice, 3 times before slamming into the guardrail. Pain erupted everywhere at once. Something warm trickled down my face. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was the sound of rain on the crumpled hood, and distant sirens growing closer. I woke to beeping monitors and the sterile smell of hospital disinfectant. Every breath sent shards of pain through my chest. My left leg was elevated, encased in some kind of brace. When I tried to move my right arm, nothing happened. "Ah, you're awake." A tall man in a white coat approached my bed, chart in hand. "I'm Dr. Alan Pierce. You've been in an accident. Madison, you're at Chicago Memorial Hospital." "How bad?" I managed to whisper through cracked lips. "You've got 3 broken ribs, a fractured femur, a dislocated shoulder, and a concussion," he replied, checking my vitals as he spoke. "There's also internal bleeding we need to address surgically. You're actually quite lucky. The driver who hit you didn't survive." The news hit me like another collision. Someone had died. I closed my eyes, trying to process it while Dr. Pierce continued explaining my condition. "The internal bleeding is our primary concern right now. We need to get you into surgery within the next few hours. However, there's a complication with the anesthesia protocol." I forced my eyes open, trying to focus on his words through the fog of pain medication. "Your medical history shows an adverse reaction to standard anesthetics during your wisdom tooth extraction 3 years ago," he explained. "The alternative protocol we need to use requires family consent due to slightly higher risks." "Hospital policy," he added apologetically. "Is there someone we can call?" "My parents," I said automatically, giving him their numbers. A kind nurse named Megan O'Connor helped me make the calls after Dr. Pierce left. My mother's phone went straight to voicemail. My father's rang several times before also switching to voicemail. I left increasingly urgent messages for both. "Mom, it's Maddie. I've been in a car accident, and I'm at Chicago Memorial. The doctors need your consent for surgery. Please call me back as soon as you get this." "Dad, I really need you to call me back. I'm in the hospital after a car accident. They need your consent for emergency surgery. Please call the hospital if you get this. An hour passed. Megan helped me try again and again. The pain was intensifying as the initial dose of medication wore off. But they couldn't give me more until they knew which surgical protocol they'd be using. Finally, my phone buzzed with a text. My father, just got your messages. Can't this wait? We're busy with the Henderson property showing, big clients. Call tomorrow. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was reading. Megan, who had stayed with me between her other duties, glanced at my face. Everything okay? She asked. Wordlessly, I showed her the phone. Her professional composure slipped for just a moment, shock flashing across her features before she recovered. Let me get the social worker, she said, gently squeezing my good hand. I tried one more desperate text. Dad, I need emergency surgery. The doctors need consent now. Please come to Chicago Memorial. The response came 3 minutes later. We've got back-to-back showings all day. Your mother says take whatever medication they recommend. We'll try to stop by this weekend. That's when I broke. The physical pain, the shock of the accident, and now this ultimate betrayal from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Tears streamed down my face as harsh, painful sobs racked my injured ribs. Megan returned with a woman who introduced herself as Linda Reyes, the hospital social worker. They both witnessed my breakdown as I clutched my phone, trying to make sense of parents who couldn't be bothered to come to their daughter's bedside after a life-threatening accident. Is there anyone else we can call? Linda asked gently when my sobs subsided enough for conversation. Another relative who might be able to come sign the consent forms. Through tears, I gave them Grandpa Henry's number. Linda stepped out to make the call while Megan stayed, offering quiet comfort and tissues. He's on his way, Linda reported when she returned. He said he'll be here within the hour. Despite living 45 miles away in a western suburb, Grandpa Henry arrived at the hospital in just under 50 minutes. At 74, he moved with the energy of a much younger man as he rushed to my bedside. His face lined with worry. Maddie, he said, taking my good hand in both of his weathered ones. My dear girl. Those 3 words contained more love than I'd heard from my parents in years. I started crying again, but these tears were different somehow. Grandpa listened intently as Dr. Pierce explained my injuries and the surgical procedure, asking sharp, relevant questions about recovery time and aftercare. When presented with the consent forms, he read every word before signing with a steady hand. As they prepared to take me to surgery, he leaned down and kissed my forehead. I'll be right here when you wake up, he promised. Then, almost to himself but just loud enough for me to hear, he added, I don't know what's wrong with that son of mine, but this isn't right, not right at all. In that moment, despite the pain and fear, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The people who truly love you show up when it matters. Everyone else just makes excuses. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took effect was Grandpa Henry's reassuring smile and the gentle pressure of his hand on mine. When I woke up hours later in the recovery room, groggy and disoriented, the first thing I saw was his familiar silhouette in the chair beside my bed. He'd stayed the entire time. His silver hair was disheveled, reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, crossword puzzle half completed on his lap. He dozed off, his chin resting on his chest, but woke immediately when I stirred. There she is, he said with gentle warmth. Welcome back, kiddo. My throat was raw from the breathing tube, but I managed to croak out a question. My parents? A shadow crossed his face. I called them, left messages letting them know you were in surgery. They haven't returned my calls yet. I closed my eyes, absorbing yet another disappointment. When I opened them again, Grandpa was watching me with such compassion that fresh tears threatened. The doctor says everything went well, he said quickly, trying to focus on positive news. They stopped the bleeding and set your leg properly. You're going to need some physical therapy, but there's no reason you won't make a full recovery. Over the next 5 days in the hospital, Grandpa Henry became a fixture in my room. He brought homemade chicken soup in thermoses. Hospital food won't help anyone heal. Fresh pajamas from my apartment that Chloe Nguyen had helped him retrieve. And an endless supply of patience. He sat with me through painful dressing changes. Distracted me with stories of his youth during difficult physical therapy sessions. And kept a running commentary on the questionable daytime television we watched together. My parents finally sent a text on day 2, "Hope you're feeling better. Dad's got a big listing presentation and Mom's showing 3 properties today. We'll try to visit when things slow down." They didn't visit, not that day, not the next. Nurse Megan became something of a friend during those days. She'd stop by even when she wasn't assigned to me, sometimes bringing an extra pudding cup that was just going to go to waste. Or staying a few minutes after her shift to chat. "Your grandfather is something special," she commented on the 4th day as she checked my vitals. "He's always been my rock," I admitted, even when I was little. "Some people really understand what family means," she said, her eyes flicking to my phone with its notable absence of parental concern. "Others need a lesson or two." My physical therapy sessions with Daniel Brooks began while I was still in the hospital. Painful, exhausting work that left me drenched in sweat and sometimes in tears. But Daniel had a gift. He knew exactly when to push and when to ease back. When to distract me with conversation. And when to let me focus in silence. "You're doing better than most patients with similar injuries," he encouraged me during one particularly difficult session. "That determination will serve you well in recovery." On the 5th day, the discharge planning began. Dr. Alan Pierce and a team of specialists came to discuss aftercare requirements. "You won't be able to manage stairs for at least 6 weeks. The doctor explained. "Your apartment building doesn't have an elevator, correct?" I nodded, reality sinking in. My 3rd floor walk-up was now completely inaccessible to me. "And you'll need assistance with daily activities until your shoulder heals enough for therapy to begin." He continued, "Is there someone who can stay with you or somewhere else you can stay during recovery?" Before I could even process the question, Grandpa Henry spoke up. "She's coming home with me. I've already set up the guest room on the main floor." The social worker, Linda Reyes, looked concerned. "Mr. Carter, caring for someone with these injuries is quite demanding. At your age." "At my age, I know what matters," he interrupted firmly. "I may be 74. But I'm in excellent health. My house is single level with only 2 steps at the entrance. I can build a temporary ramp for that. I'm retired and have nowhere to be except there for my granddaughter." His certainty left no room for argument. Linda nodded, making notes in her file. It was only after the medical team left that my phone finally rang with my parents' number. For a moment, hope flared that perhaps they'd finally realized the severity of the situation. I put the call on speaker so Grandpa could hear too. "Maddie, it's Mom. Your dad and I were thinking about your situation. And we want you to know we're sorry we haven't been able to visit yet. This spring market is just crazy busy." No question about my condition. No mention of the surgery. Just excuses. "The doctor says I need somewhere to recover," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I can't go back to my apartment because of the stairs." "Oh." A pause. Then muffled conversation. I couldn't make out the words. "Well, honey, you know our schedule is so unpredictable with showings and open houses. And the guest room is full of staging furniture right now. We're just not set up to accommodate someone with medical needs." Grandpa Henry's face darkened, but he remained silent, letting me handle the call. "It's fine," I said, surprising myself with how little their rejection hurt after everything else. "Grandpa has offered to let me stay with him." "Oh, well that's probably for the best then," Mom said lightly. "Your dad says to tell you we'll try to visit on Sunday if the open house wraps up early enough." They didn't visit that Sunday or the next. Moving into Grandpa Henry's ranch-style house in Elmhurst was like stepping into a warm embrace after years in the cold. He'd transformed his guest room into a recovery haven with extra pillows for elevation. A small refrigerator stocked with water and juice. A television he'd moved from his own bedroom. And a bell, for emergencies only, but don't hesitate if you need me. Our days fell into a gentle rhythm. Mornings began with Grandpa bringing breakfast on a tray. You need protein to heal, he'd say before helping me to the bathroom and through basic hygiene routines that were humbling but necessary. Home health nurses came 3 times a week to check my progress. And Daniel Brooks arrived for in-home physical therapy sessions that gradually increased in intensity. Evenings were my favorite time. After dinner, which Grandpa insisted on cooking despite my offers to order delivery, we'd watch old movies or play cards. He taught me gin rummy and cribbage, games from before you young people had phones to entertain you. Sometimes we'd just talk, his stories painting vivid pictures of a different era. It was during one of those evenings, about 2 weeks into my stay, that Grandpa finally opened up about my father. Richard was always hungry for more, he said quietly as we sat in the living room, the remains of our ice cream sundaes on the coffee table between us. Even as a boy, if he got one toy, he wanted 2. If his friend had a bike, he needed a better one. I listened, recognizing the pattern that had continued into adulthood. Your grandmother and I tried to teach him gratitude, to appreciate what he had rather than always looking to the next thing. But some lessons don't take. He sighed, glancing at the family photos on his mantle. When he met your mother, I thought maybe she'd balance him. Instead, she adopted his values. Why didn't you ever say anything? I asked. About how they treated me. Grandpa's eyes grew sad. I did. In the early years, told Richard he was missing what mattered most. He accused me of trying to run his life, said I was jealous of his success. He shook his head slowly. After a while, I realized confronting him only made him dig in harder. So I focused on being there for you instead. I always wondered why they seemed so different from you, I admitted softly. I've worried for years that I failed somehow in raising him. Grandpa confessed, vulnerability etching deeper lines in his weathered face. That I didn't teach him the right values. But seeing you, Maddie, how you've turned out despite their neglect, maybe I didn't fail completely. In that moment, I realized our healing wasn't just physical. There were older wounds being addressed in this quiet house, hurts that had festered for years. Finally getting the attention they deserved. 2 weeks after coming to stay with Grandpa, my parents finally made an appearance. They arrived in my father's BMW, bringing a generic, get well, balloon and a box of chocolates with a pharmacy price tag still attached. The visit had clearly been an afterthought, squeezed between other commitments. The house looks smaller than I remember, my father commented as he entered, glancing around with barely concealed judgment. Not everyone needs 4,000 square feet to be happy, Richard, Grandpa replied mildly, though I caught the edge in his voice. My mother made a show of concern, fussing with my blanket and asking surface-level questions about my recovery. My father paced the living room, checking his watch repeatedly. So, when do they think you can get back to work? He asked abruptly. Cutting through my explanation of physical therapy progress. You don't want to lose that job, small as it is. The doctors say at least another month before part-time would be possible. I explained, my firm has been understanding. They're holding my position. A month? He looked genuinely shocked. That seems excessive for a few broken bones. She nearly died, Richard, Grandpa said quietly. The internal bleeding was substantial. My father waved a dismissive hand. Well, the important thing is getting back to normal as quickly as possible. You can't afford to be seen as unreliable in the workforce. The visit lasted exactly 47 minutes. As they prepared to leave, I overheard them in the kitchen while Grandpa helped them locate their coats. This is so inconvenient, my father muttered, thinking I couldn't hear. We could have used her help with the spring listings. At least your father is handling it, my mother replied. Can you imagine if she'd expected to stay with us? With our schedule? They left with hollow promises to check in soon, and vague mentions of possibly stopping by the following weekend. The door had barely closed behind them when Grandpa returned to the living room. His expression carefully neutral. They mean well, he offered, though neither of us believed it. Do they? I asked softly. He had no answer. The next day brought a new kind of worry. Mail that Chloe Nguyen had collected from my apartment included several medical bills and insurance statements. Despite having decent health insurance through my employer, The accident was generating substantial costs. The drunk driver who hit me had been uninsured, which complicated matters further. As I spread the paperwork across the dining table, the reality of my financial situation hit hard. Between medical bills, ongoing rent for an apartment I couldn't even use, car payments for a vehicle that was now totaled, and regular living expenses, my modest savings wouldn't last long. "We'll figure it out," Grandpa Henry assured me when he found me staring at the numbers in dismay. One step at a time. I spent the next day making calls to my insurance company, trying to understand coverage options. That's when something strange happened. The representative mentioned ongoing communications they'd had with my parents. "I'm sorry, what communications?" I asked, confused. "According to our notes," the representative said, "your parents contacted us 3 days after the accident to discuss settlement options. As beneficiaries on your policy, they were inquiring about how funds would be dispersed." Ice formed in my stomach. "Beneficiaries?" I repeated. "I never listed them as beneficiaries." A pause on the line. "They're listed here as secondary contacts and financial proxies. Authorized approximately 2 years ago. 2 years ago, when I had first started at the law firm. My father had offered to help me set up my benefits package, insisting it was complicated and that he'd handle the paperwork. I'd been grateful at the time, never suspecting he would add himself and my mother as financial proxies without my knowledge. Further investigation revealed they'd been in regular contact with both my health and auto insurance companies, positioning themselves to manage any settlements or payouts. They'd even contacted my apartment building's management about terminating my lease, given the circumstances. My hands trembled as I called them directly. For once, my father answered on the first ring. "Maddie, I was just about to call you," he said briskly. "Great news on the insurance front. I think we can get them to offer a reasonable settlement for your car." "Why are you listed as a beneficiary on my policies?" I cut in. A pause. "Well, that's just practical," he replied, voice calm. "You're young. You don't understand how these things work. Insurance companies try to minimize payouts. They need to deal with someone who knows the system. Someone like a real estate agent with no legal training?" My tone sharpened. "Now, Madison, don't be ungrateful," he snapped. "Your mother and I are trying to help. These medical bills are going to be substantial. We think you should consider moving home, where we can keep an eye on your finances until you're back on your feet." The truth hit me like a physical blow. "You want control of my settlement money." "Don't be ridiculous," he said sharply, but there was something in his tone, defensive, possessive, that confirmed everything I feared. "We're your parents," he continued. "We're looking out for your interests. What are you planning to use the money for?" "Dad?" I pressed. Another pause. Then, too casually, "If you must know, we've been presented with an opportunity to expand the business, a second office location in Oak Park. The timing is perfect, but we need additional capital. So you were planning to use my insurance settlement for your business expansion?" I said, voice rising despite the pain in my ribs. "It's a family business, Maddie," he said, as if explaining to a child. "Everything we do benefits you in the long run. This accident, unfortunate as it is, presented a timely opportunity." I hung up without another word. Then I sat on Grandpa Henry's couch and sobbed until my chest ached and my throat was raw. All the years of emotional neglect crystallized in this final betrayal. My own parents saw my near-death experience as a financial opportunity for themselves. Grandpa found me there, curled in on myself, struggling to breathe through the tears. "What happened?" he asked. Alarmed. Through broken sentences, I explained what I'd discovered. His face grew more thunderous with each word until I barely recognized the gentle man I knew. "This ends now," he said finally, his voice low but solid. "I've stood by too long, watching them treat you this way." I could barely whisper. "What can we do?" "First, you rest," he said, helping me lie back against the pillows. "Then tomorrow, we call my old friend Bill Harper. He practiced family law for 40 years before retiring. He'll know exactly what steps to take." That night, as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, one thought brought me a strange sense of peace. I was finally ready to break free from the toxic bond that had masqueraded as parental love for 25 years. The next morning, Bill Harper arrived at Grandpa's house. A tall, distinguished man with silver hair and keen blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He carried a leather briefcase despite being retired for 5 years. Frank and I, Henry, have been friends for nearly 50 years, he said with a gentle smile. When he called about your situation, I knew it was serious. He's not one for exaggeration. For the next 2 hours, Bill Harper listened intently as I explained everything, my history with my parents, their financial interference, and the insurance communications. He took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed his deep legal expertise. What you're describing is a concerning pattern of financial control and potential fraud, he said finally. While you're an adult and not in need of legal emancipation in the traditional sense, there are steps we can take to formally separate your finances from your parents' influence. He outlined several options: removing them as beneficiaries, creating new accounts at different institutions, and filing legal notifications to prevent them from claiming any authority over my affairs. The most concerning aspect, Bill added, is their unauthorized access to your accounts. That crosses several legal boundaries, particularly if they were positioning themselves to redirect funds without your consent. We developed a multi-step plan. First, I would review every financial document to identify where they might still have access. Next, we would open new accounts at banks they had no connection to. Finally, we would prepare formal legal notifications of financial separation to be delivered to them and all relevant institutions. I'd also recommend executing a new power of attorney, Bill suggested. Given your recent medical situation, having someone you trust empowered to make decisions if you're incapacitated is prudent. Currently, as your next of kin, your parents would have default authority in many situations. That made perfect sense. I want Grandpa to have that, I said immediately, glancing at Henry. Of course, he said, not missing a beat. After Bill Harper left with promises to draft the necessary documents, I reached out to Rachel Bennett, my college friend who now worked as a financial advisor. I knew your parents were intense about money, Rachel said as we pored over statements and policies that evening. But this is another level. They've basically created backdoor access to nearly every financial aspect of your life. With Rachel's help, I began the process of disentanglement. New bank accounts, updated insurance policies with Rachel listed as my financial advisor of record, credit monitoring to alert me of any new access attempts. And for the first time in years, I felt something foreign yet liberating: control. As my financial independence slowly took shape, my support network grew stronger around me. Nurse Megan O'Connor stopped by on her day off, bringing homemade cookies and offering to drive me to appointments. Thomas Adler, my boss, called regularly with updates from the office and assurances that my job was safe. Take the time you need to heal properly, he insisted over the phone. Your desk will be waiting when you're ready. Meanwhile, Chloe Nguyen had been maintaining my apartment, collecting mail, watering my plants, and even talking with the landlord. He asked about your plans, she said one afternoon while sitting across from me at the kitchen table. I told him you were focusing on recovery but definitely planning to return. He seemed understanding. The physical part of my recovery continued alongside all the legal and financial restructuring. Daniel Brooks increased the intensity of my therapy sessions, pushing me harder every time. You're healing faster than expected, he said with a grin one morning as I managed to take 5 unassisted steps with crutches. That determination of yours is paying off. While my body strengthened, I also began confronting the emotional scars that had long gone unhealed. Linda Reyes, the social worker who had helped me in the hospital, referred me to a therapist she trusted, Dr. Evelyn Morris. The first few sessions with Dr. Morris were raw and draining. She listened quietly as I recounted not just the accident, but years of subtle neglect and conditional affection. What you're describing is a pattern of emotional neglect that likely began in childhood, Dr. Morris said gently during our second session. The financial manipulation is simply an extension of that same dynamic, a lack of respect for your autonomy. Her words hit like a revelation I had been avoiding for years. I kept making excuses for them. I admitted, telling myself they were just busy, or that they showed love differently, or that I was too demanding. Dr. Morris nodded. That's very common in children of emotionally neglectful parents. It's often easier to blame ourselves than to accept that the people who should love us unconditionally may be incapable of doing so. Each week, she helped me peel back layers of guilt I hadn't even known I carried. Slowly, I began to understand that the love I'd been seeking from my parents was something they were never able, or willing, to give. Meanwhile, Bill Harper was moving quickly. Within 2 weeks, he had prepared a comprehensive packet of legal documents. Formal notifications of financial separation. Revocation of any power of attorney previously held by my parents. Removal of both Richard and Susan Carter as beneficiaries or secondary contacts on all accounts. New power of attorney papers naming Henry Carter for both medical and financial decisions. These have no legal requirement to be delivered in person, Bill explained during one of his visits. But there's sometimes value in a face-to-face delivery, especially in family cases. It leaves no room for claims of confusion or miscommunication. I hesitated. You mean, confront them? He nodded slowly. Yes, but on your terms, not theirs. The idea terrified me. I hadn't faced my father directly since the hospital. But Dr. Morris helped me see it differently. You've spent your whole life being dismissed or talked over, she said during one session. Speaking your truth to them isn't about changing them. It's about reclaiming your voice. Grandpa Henry, as always, offered quiet wisdom. Some conversations need to happen in person, not for them, but for you, he told me one evening as we sat on the porch swing. So that when you walk away, you'll know you stood up for yourself. That thought stayed with me for days. When Bill Harper came by again, I told him I was ready. Let's do it face to face. He nodded approvingly. I'll handle the logistics. You just prepare yourself emotionally. The confrontation was scheduled for the following Saturday afternoon at Grandpa Henry's house. Bill would be present as a legal witness. The night before, I sat on the porch swing again, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky burned in shades of pink and gold, and a soft breeze stirred the old oak tree in the yard. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Grandpa asked quietly. Terrified, I admitted, but also relieved. It feels like something that's been weighing on me for years is finally being addressed. He nodded slowly, a faint smile in his eyes. That's how truth feels sometimes, scary, but freeing. What if they refuse to sign? I asked. What if they make a scene? Then they'll just show their true colors again, he said simply, and you'll know you made the right choice. That night, I couldn't sleep. My heart pounded with anticipation and fear. I replayed every moment of the past few weeks, the accident, the betrayal, the discovery, and the quiet strength I had gained through recovery. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, fear gave way to clarity. I wasn't doing this out of anger. I was doing it because I deserved peace. The next day, the house felt unnaturally still. I wore a soft cream blouse and black slacks, nothing flashy. Just something that made me feel grounded. The blue folder, the one containing every document that would change my life, sat neatly on the coffee table in front of me. Bill Harper arrived 30 minutes early, carrying his briefcase. He reviewed each document carefully one more time. Remember, Maddie, he said gently, you're not asking for permission. You're informing them of your decisions. Stay calm, be direct, and don't let them pull you into old patterns. Grandpa Henry rearranged the furniture to create a formal setting, 2 chairs opposite the couch, with me in the center, and him and Bill flanking me. It wasn't accidental. The arrangement itself was a message. I was no longer alone. When the doorbell rang exactly at 2 o'clock, my heart leapt into my throat. Grandpa squeezed my shoulder gently before walking to the door. I heard my father's voice first, confident, irritated, impatient. Dad, this formal meeting seems unnecessary. If Madison needed to talk, a simple phone call would have been fine. Some conversations deserve more respect than a phone call. Henry replied calmly. A moment later, my parents entered the living room. Richard Carter, in his pressed khakis and company logo polo, and Susan Carter, in a navy blazer and heels, walked in with the air of people accustomed to controlling the room. Their expressions shifted when they saw Bill Harper seated beside me. "What's this about?" my father demanded. "And who is this gentleman?" "This is Mr. Harper, a family law attorney and my grandfather's friend," I said, my voice steady. "Please, have a seat." They exchanged a wary glance but complied, sitting side by side on the sofa. Neither asked how I was feeling. Neither mentioned the accident. Bill met my eye and gave a small nod. It was time. My father's lips curved into a tight, almost mocking smile. "Business must be going well if you can afford an attorney," he said, leaning back on the sofa. "Though I'm not sure why you'd need legal counsel for a family discussion." I took a deep breath. My palms were damp, but my voice came out steadier than I felt. "I asked you here today because we need to address some important matters, specifically your involvement in my financial affairs without my knowledge or consent." My mother's polite smile faltered. "I don't know what you mean. Honey, we've only tried to help. Going behind my back to contact my insurance companies, positioning yourselves to control my settlement money, that isn't help," I said flatly. "It's interference, and it's fraud." "Now, wait just a minute," my father started, his tone hardening. "As your parents." "As my parents," I interrupted, surprising even myself with how firm I sounded. "You were supposed to support and protect me. Instead, you've consistently put your own interests first. Never more clearly than when you refused to come to the hospital when I almost died." The directness of the words seemed to stun them both. My mother blinked rapidly. My father shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. "We had commitments," Mom began weakly. "Property showings." "I remember." I cut in. "You texted, 'Can't this wait? We're busy.' That was your response when I needed emergency surgery." My father's expression hardened. "You're taking that out of context. We didn't realize how serious." "It doesn't matter what you realized," I said quietly. "What matters is what you did, or didn't do. And it's part of a pattern that's existed my entire life." I reached for the blue folder on the coffee table and slid it toward them. "These documents formalize the separation of our financial affairs. They remove you both as beneficiaries and contacts on all my insurance policies, bank accounts, and legal matters. They revoke any authorizations you may have had to act on my behalf. And they name Grandpa Henry as my power of attorney for both medical and financial decisions if I'm ever incapacitated." My father didn't even look at the papers. His face flushed red. "This is ridiculous. We're your parents." "Being a parent," I said, my voice steady, "is more than biology. It's showing up when it matters. It's putting your child's needs before your own. And it's something I've experienced more from Grandpa in the past 3 weeks than from either of you in 25 years. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "You can't mean that, Madison. Everything we've done has been for you, for your future." "No," I said, gentler now, but still unwavering. "It's been for yourselves. Even this accident became an opportunity for your business. You saw my tragedy as a financial windfall." My father stood abruptly, his voice rising. "I won't sit here and be accused by my own daughter. This is absurd. Your grandfather has clearly poisoned you against us." Henry finally spoke, his tone calm but firm. "Richard, your daughter nearly died while you were showing houses. I sat in that waiting room praying she'd survive. While you were expanding your business, I was helping her learn to walk again. This isn't about me, son. It's about what you failed to do. Stay out of this, Dad," my father snapped. "This has always been your problem, thinking you know better than everyone else. Well, we built a successful business without your approval." "This isn't about the business," I interjected, pulling the focus back. "It's about our relationship, and the boundaries I'm setting from this point on." I looked directly at him. "I need you both to review and sign these documents, acknowledging receipt." "And if we refuse?" he challenged. Bill Harper finally spoke for the first time. "The documents will still be legally binding. Mr. Carter, your signature merely acknowledges receipt. Refusal to sign doesn't invalidate them." My father turned a sharp glare toward him. Then back to me. So this is how you repay us for everything we've done? 25 years of providing for you. Giving you every opportunity. His words might once have filled me with guilt. But not anymore. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I said softly. I'm doing this to protect myself, to build a healthier life. One that's not built on guilt or manipulation. He laughed bitterly. Respect? You ambush us with legal paperwork and call that respect? Yes, I said, meeting his gaze. The kind of respect that means you ask before making yourself a beneficiary on someone else's insurance. The kind that means you show up when your daughter's lying in a hospital bed. The kind I've had to find elsewhere because it wasn't available from you. My mother reached for the folder with trembling hands. Let's just look at what she's asking. Richard. He grabbed her wrist, stopping her. Don't. This is emotional manipulation. Can't you see she's upset about the accident and lashing out? I took another breath, calm. Deliberate. I'm not lashing out. I've spent weeks thinking about this. These decisions aren't made in anger, but in self-preservation, and they're not negotiable. Something in my tone must have reached him, because my father's anger faltered for a moment. He looked at me as though seeing someone unfamiliar, someone stronger. You're serious about this? Completely, I said. Silence hung heavy in the room. The only sound was the soft ticking of the grandfather clock by the window. Finally, he reached for the folder and flipped through the documents. Each page seemed to infuriate him further. His signature, when he finally scrawled it, was angry and bold, cutting into the paper. He shoved the pen toward my mother. Sign it, he said sharply. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she obeyed, her hand shaking. When she finished, he shoved the folder back toward me. Is this what you wanted? To legally disown us? I met his eyes. No. What I wanted was parents who loved me enough to show up. What I wanted was to never need these documents at all. But we don't always get what we want. He stood abruptly, his face pale with fury. I don't recognize you anymore. This isn't the daughter we raised. Maybe that's the problem, I said softly. Maybe the daughter you raised finally realized she deserves better. My mother dabbed her eyes. Madison, please reconsider. We can work through this as a family. I hope we can, I said sincerely, but it will have to be on new terms, with clear boundaries and mutual respect. Let's go, Susan, my father said tersely. There's nothing more to discuss. As they walked to the door, he turned back one last time. When you realize what a mistake this is, don't expect us to welcome you back with open arms. Family loyalty goes both ways. Yes, I said quietly. It does. That's exactly the point. The door closed behind them with a decisive click. For a moment, I sat frozen, hands trembling slightly in my lap. The confrontation I'd dreaded for weeks was over, and I had stood my ground. Grandpa Henry crossed the room and placed an arm gently around my shoulders. I'm proud of you, he said simply. For the first time in weeks, I felt I could finally breathe. Bill Harper stayed for a cup of coffee afterward, reviewing the signed documents one last time. You handled that remarkably well, he said as he packed up his briefcase. Standing up to family is one of the hardest things to do. You didn't waver once. When he left, the house felt calm again, a peace so profound it almost startled me. That night, exhaustion caught up with me. My body still ached, but my mind felt lighter than it had in years. When sleep finally came, it was deep and dreamless. I woke the next morning with a feeling I couldn't quite name at first. It took a few moments before I realized what it was: freedom. You look different today, Grandpa Henry said as he brought in our usual morning coffee. Do I? I smiled faintly. I feel different, like I finally put down something heavy I've been carrying for years. He nodded, pride warming his tired eyes. That's what freedom feels like, kiddo. The next few weeks moved quietly, peacefully. Rachel Bennett came over one afternoon to help finalize my financial separation. Together, we closed my old accounts, opened new ones, and set up automatic payments for rent and medical bills. You're in better shape than most clients I see, Rachel said with a grin as we looked over the numbers. You've got solid savings habits. And once the insurance settlement comes through, you'll have a comfortable cushion. That reassurance felt like oxygen. For the first time since the accident, I wasn't just surviving, I was rebuilding. With my finances secure, I turned my attention to my living situation. My medical team had cleared me to return to independent living within another month. Provided my space was accessible. My third-floor walk-up clearly wasn't. That's when Chloe Nguyen came through again. "You won't believe this," she said, bursting into Grandpa's kitchen with a grin. "The ground floor unit in your building just opened up. It's a little bigger than your old place. And it's only $20 more a month. I already talked to the landlord, he's willing to hold it for you." When I saw it a week later, I knew it was perfect. Wide doorways, no steps, and a small patio with sunlight pouring in through sliding glass doors. A fresh start in every sense. I signed the lease that same day. Returning to work came gradually. Thomas Adler allowed me to start remotely, handling light casework from Grandpa's dining room table. A month later, once my driving restriction was lifted, I began half-days at the office. My coworkers welcomed me like family, clapping as I walked in with crutches and a determined smile. "We missed your organization," Thomas said warmly. "The filing system's chaos without you." Those words made me laugh, the kind of laugh that felt healing. Meanwhile, my parents remained silent. 2 weeks after our confrontation, I received a single text from my mother. "We hope you're feeling better. The door is open when you're ready to apologize." I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. In therapy, Dr. Evelyn Morris helped me unpack that lingering ache, the grief of letting go of what I had always wished my parents could be. "They're still offering conditional love," she said gently, "the condition being that you accept their version of reality. That's not love, Maddie, that's control." "I know," I said quietly, "but it still hurts." She nodded. "Of course it does. Grieving the family you wanted is part of healing from the one you had." So, instead of focusing on what was missing, I invested my energy into what I had, my chosen family. Every weekend, Grandpa and I shared dinners, swapping stories over his famous pot roast or whatever new recipe I'd tried from YouTube. Chloe and I turned our Sunday mornings into a ritual: coffee, croissants, and catching up. Megan O'Connor introduced me to her hiking group, and though I started with the easier trails, the rhythm of walking under open skies made me feel alive again. Months passed like that, quietly, but beautifully. 6 months after the accident, a letter arrived in my mailbox. My mother's handwriting stopped me in my tracks. I stood there for a long time before I opened it. "Dear Madison, I've been doing a lot of thinking since our last meeting. Your father is still angry, but I've begun to question some of our choices. The hospital sent us your full medical report. Reading it, seeing how close we came to losing you while we were showing a house that didn't even sell, it forced me to face some uncomfortable truths. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I don't think I've earned it. But I would like the chance to talk, just the two of us. No agenda, no expectations. Love. Mom." I reread it 3 times. My chest tight with conflicting emotions. Grandpa Henry and Dr. Morris both encouraged me to consider meeting her. "People can change," Grandpa said thoughtfully. "Not everyone does, but it's possible. Your mother always had a softer heart than your father." So I agreed. We met at a quiet coffee shop halfway between our homes. When she walked in, she looked smaller somehow, like time and guilt had taken pieces of her I didn't remember losing. The first few minutes were awkward. We talked about the weather, her garden, my new apartment. Then she took a deep breath and said, "I joined a support group." I blinked. "A support group?" "For parents estranged from their adult children," she said softly. Some of the stories I heard, they sounded familiar. Too familiar. I didn't like seeing myself in them. It wasn't an apology, not yet. But it was something I had never seen from her before: vulnerability. "Dad?" I asked gently. She sighed. "He's not ready. He may never be. His pride." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "But I'm here, for myself. And for you. If you'll let me be." I nodded slowly, one step at a time. We agreed to meet once a month for lunch. No pressure, no talk of money or business. Just being present. It was a beginning, fragile, but real. By the 1-year anniversary of the accident, I could hike moderate trails again. I'd returned to full-time work, earned another promotion, paralegal specialist, and found purpose in helping clients navigate personal injury cases. My experience gave me empathy and insight that no textbook ever could. You've turned something terrible into something powerful, Thomas Adler told me after the announcement. That's rare. At home, Grandpa and I celebrated with takeout and laughter. The evening ended with us sitting on the porch, the sunset painting the sky in gold and violet hues. I never thought something so terrible could lead to something so good. I said quietly, I wouldn't choose to live through that crash again, but I can't regret where it led me. Grandpa nodded, his hand resting gently over mine. Life's hardest lessons often come wrapped in the roughest packages. The truth of that sank deep. The accident that nearly took my life had, in some strange way, given me the courage to finally live it, honestly, freely, and without apology. Time has a strange way of softening pain, not erasing it, but reshaping it into something gentler, something that no longer owns you. A year and a half after the accident, I sat once again on Grandpa Henry's porch swing, a warm summer breeze brushing against my face. The sound of cicadas hummed softly in the distance, the golden light of evening washing over the yard. I watched as Grandpa hummed to himself, watering the small patch of roses that had become his pride and joy. I was thinking about something, I said as he set down the watering can. If that night had gone differently, if that truck hadn't hit me, I probably would still be chasing their approval, still pretending that the crumbs they gave me were enough. He lowered himself into the chair beside me, nodding slowly. Funny, isn't it? Sometimes the universe has to break us to show us who we really are. I smiled faintly. Yeah, it broke me, all right, but it also rebuilt me. He chuckled softly. That's because you let it. That night, I journaled for the first time in months. I wrote about how I'd learned to define success differently, not by paychecks or cars or titles, but by peace of mind, by quiet mornings when I could breathe without waiting for someone else's approval. I wrote about Chloe, who had become like a sister to me, about Megan, whose kindness had carried me through the darkest hours, about Rachel, whose practical wisdom had grounded me, and about Dr. Evelyn Morris, who had helped me understand that closure isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes it's just learning to stop needing answers from people who can't give them. And, of course, I wrote about Grandpa Henry, the one constant light through every storm. My life had changed in ways I could never have imagined. I'd moved into my new apartment, my body stronger and my mind steadier than ever. The scars on my leg had faded to pale reminders of survival. The emotional scars, the ones my parents had left, had faded too, though they still ached sometimes when I least expected it. Susan Carter, my mother, and I continued our cautious reconnection. Lunch once a month became coffee twice a month. We talked about small things, her garden, my job, old family memories, and occasionally, the silences between us carried more healing than any words could. She never tried to justify what happened again. That, more than anything, showed me she was truly changing. Richard Carter, my father, never reached out. I accepted that, not with bitterness, but with understanding. Some people build walls so high around their pride that they can no longer see love on the other side. And that's okay. Because I had found mine elsewhere, in the people who showed up, who listened, who stayed. At work, I'd become known for my compassion and resilience. Clients in personal injury cases often looked at me differently when I said, I've been where you are. It wasn't just empathy, it was lived truth. Every broken bone, every betrayal, every sleepless night had shaped the person sitting across from them. And somehow, that made it all worth it. One evening, as Grandpa and I sat together watching the sky fade from gold to indigo, he said quietly, You know, Maddie, your story reminds me of something your grandmother used to say. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shares your heart. I swallowed the lump in my throat. She was right. He smiled, his eyes twinkling in the twilight. You've built a good life, Madison, a life filled with people who love you the way you deserve. That's something even your parents' money can't buy. Thanks to you, I whispered. He shook his head. No, thanks to you. You did the hard part. You learned how to stand on your own. A soft wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden. I closed my eyes and breathed it in, the smell of summer, of healing, of freedom. I realized, in that moment, that I didn't need revenge. I didn't need them to regret or apologize. My peace was enough. Because the truest revenge against those who hurt you is not anger or bitterness, it's living well. It's thriving when they expected you to crumble. It's finding joy in the quiet, strength in the pain, and love in the places they overlooked. So, when people ask me now what happened, how I managed to rebuild my life after betrayal, I tell them this. It starts the moment you decide to stop chasing the love that keeps running from you. The moment you stop begging for scraps of affection from people who never learned how to give. And instead, you turn toward the ones who see you, who stay when it's hard. Who hold your hand when it's shaking. Who remind you that you are enough. Because family isn't always blood. Sometimes, it's a nurse who stays after her shift just to make sure you're okay. Sometimes, it's a neighbor who brings you mail and makes you laugh again. Sometimes, it's a grandfather who never gives up on you, even when everyone else does. And sometimes, it's you. The version of yourself that rises again after being broken. The one that chooses peace over approval, truth over silence, and love over fear. That's the version of me I live for now. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day, my father will call. Maybe he won't. Either way, I'll be okay. Because I've already found everything I need: freedom, purpose, and the kind of love that doesn't ask for permission to exist. So if you're listening to my story right now, maybe sitting in your car or alone in your room wondering if walking away makes you ungrateful or cruel, hear this. It doesn't. Setting boundaries is not cruelty. Healing is not betrayal. And choosing yourself, that's not selfishness. That's survival. So choose you, every single time. And when you finally do, you'll understand what I mean when I say, the quietest revenge is simply peace.